Welcome to An Eagle's View, where you're able to get an in-depth perspectives from leading experts. My name is Tonda Hill, and whether you are a curious citizen, a seasoned professional, or just simply looking to get more information, our conversations promises to provide in-depth, curious information for you to learn more about the criminal legal system. I'm so excited to introduce my guest on today, Rachel Murdoch. Rachel Murdoch is the owner clinician at Beyond the Storm Behavioral Health, LLC, a group practice in Eastern Jackson County, Missouri. She is licensed in Missouri, Kansas, and Iowa, and is a board-approved supervisor for provisionally licensed counselors in Missouri and Kansas. Her practice specializes in mental health counseling for first responders and individuals experiencing anxiety, mood disorders, or post-traumatic stress, and survivors of abuse. She also operates forensic consulting and training, a business which functions to provide expert testimony, consultation, and training for individuals working with the criminal and civil justice system, and coaching for individuals struggling with burnout and self-care. Prior to reopening and rebranding her practice, Rachel worked crimes against children for 17 years. 10 and a half of those years with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Additionally, Rachel is an adjunct faculty member at Missouri State University and Southern New Hampshire University, and will begin teaching in the counseling psychology graduate program at Avila University in the fall. Welcome, Rachel Murdoch, to the program.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
So it is a kind of rainy day in Lawrence, so we hope you're snuggling up and somewhere in a place where you can get entertained and listen to some really great information from Ms. Murdoch. We're going to invite you to ask us questions. We do have a conversation, but we would like this to be a fluid conversation. And remember to like and share this video so that we can get this information out to other individuals. So again, thank you so much, Rachel, for coming.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here and outside of the courtroom because that's usually where I see you.
It is usually where we see each other. So this is a really great time to have kind of a casual conversation.
Yes.
Now, I always like to start our conversation with making sure everyone has the same understanding of what we're talking about. So can you give us a definition of what is intimate partner violence?
Sure. And I agree. I think having a definition and idea of what we're looking at just helps the conversation and dispel any myths or things that aren't accurate. So intimate partner violence refers to a pattern of behaviors that is typically used by one partner to maintain power and control over another partner in an intimate relationship. It can show up in various forms, including physical, sexual, emotional, and economic abuse.
Now, you said something about a cycle and power and control. Can you first delve into what is that power and control that we see in intimate partner relationships?
Sure. It can show up in a lot of different ways. And so it can include physical violence, such as hitting, punching, slapping, sexual violence like coercion or rape, emotional violence like manipulation, verbal insults, gaslighting, and then economic abuse can occur where there might be control of finances or preventing the victim from working. So it can manifest in any combination of those factors and can make the person feel very trapped and like they are under the control of the other partner and may not know how to escape from the situation.
And you also referenced pattern, and I'm familiar with the cycle of abuse. Are you familiar with that concept?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Can you talk about that with us? What is that cycle of abuse that we see in intimate partner relationships?
Sure. So with the cycle of abuse, it essentially means that things are not always going poorly in some of these relationships. And so there can be an event that happens that is negative. And then there is a cycle where we kind of cycle through moments of repair or moments where there are positive interactions. And that is what can keep people engaged sometimes, because then they may say, well, things aren't always bad, or look how nice she is when she's not being violent towards me. And so it can be very confusing because it's kind of an up and down, back and forth, positive and negative interactions, and those things can keep people very engaged in the relationship because they have honeymoon periods and other times where things aren't going poorly and maybe they're going quite well. And so it can be very confusing to the psyche to think, man, I thought I wanted to leave this relationship, but look how good things are now during that honeymoon phase. Then the buildup comes before the next negative event, and then the negative event comes, and then we follow in that cycle again and again.
So it's interesting in your description, you said she. So is that a myth? Is there a myth that males cannot be involved in intimate partner violence? Can you talk to us about that?
Sure. And yes, I purposely said she because I think sometimes we consistently label males as the offender. And we do know that both men and women can be victims and perpetrators of intimate partner violence. And there is, a mix of statistics on what that looks like, but we do know that both males and females are not immune to potentially being victimized in that way.
And so individuals that are in intimate partner, violence type of relationships, is that we said there was myths that it's not necessarily for a gender. Are there other myths out there that you want to dispel with our audience?
I think one of the main things that I hear that is really misunderstood is like why someone doesn't leave a violent relationship. I think for those of us on the outside or those of us that are in healthy relationships, we can easily say to ourselves, like, oh, you know what? If my husband ever hit me, I'd be out the door. There's no way that I would stay. And it's a really complex situation. And there are a lot of factors and there are a lot of considerations. And so I think the myth there is just that it's really easy to leave a relationship. There are a lot of financial considerations. Maybe there's children involved, home involved, work involved. There's just a lot of complications. And so I think just dispelling that it's easy to leave a relationship like this, and that just, holding space for the fact that it really is a difficult thing and it's complex and it involves a lot of big decisions that need to be made before those things can happen. So outside looking in, it may seem ridiculous that someone is in a relationship like this, but it's really more complicated than that.
So what should individuals do to support? So we just heard you say, we shouldn't say, if I would do, if I was that, I would do this. So what are other ways that we're supporting individuals who we believe may be experiencing, an intimate partner violent type of relationship?
Yeah, it's a great question because the reality is that we can't make other people do things. So if you have someone that that you fear is in a relationship that is experiencing intimate partner violence, is being that non-judgmental, safe space to confide in and not providing, judgment or why don't you do this? I can't believe you're doing that. I can't believe you're leaving the kids in this, and really helping understand what that person's experiences are, helping develop a safety plan, helping develop a plan of exit, other things that you might be able to do outside looking in while also holding space for whatever that partner's experience is. Maybe their biggest hangup is what they're going to do with their pets. And so helping provide some suggestions or resources or offerings if that is a concern of theirs, but really just meeting people where they're at and not being one more person to tell them that they should have done something, could have done something, or placing blame on the victim, which is the last thing that we would want in this situation.
Well, you were talking about things that we can do to help. What are some warning signs that we can look at so that we can start thinking about being proactive and getting them those resources, those plans? What are some warning signs that us or someone maybe in a relationship like this could see that, hey, this might be turning into a cycle of abuse?
Sure. So the thing that I always encourage my clients to consider is, behavior changes in their loved ones. So if your friend or loved one is suddenly becoming more isolated or seeming fearful when asking, them to spend time with you, or seeming like they're having to ask permission suddenly to engage in a conversation or meet you out for dinner, if this is not something that is standard behavior for a friend that's in a relationship, then it might be worth some further questions. So if you notice, of course, if there's physical markings or bruisings or other things that don't align with the reported injury, that is a pretty telltale sign. But recognizing that a lot of intimate partner violence is stuff that happens behind closed doors and without evidence shown on the body. And so checking in with what you're seeing, what you're observing. And then even if you are around the partnership, how does that person interact with, your friend or loved one in front of you? Because I always say if someone is going to be that bold to engage in behavior like this on the outside and publicly, I fear that it's worse behind closed doors. And so if there's things that give you pause, just being able to address that and in a kind way to say, I was a bit concerned about, how he was speaking to you. And so can you help me understand what that's like for you? Or that, really didn't seem okay the way that he talked to you in front of us. And so I'm just wondering how you feel about that, just to kind of open the door and invite the conversation and and help your friend or loved one see that you're noticing what they're experiencing.
So that's what I always think about, bringing it to their attention that you noticing it. How do we do that respectfully where it doesn't shame
Right.
the individual or place blame on it? Can you give us a little bit more cues on how we approach those type of conversations, because they are really difficult to do?
Absolutely. And I always think about when I am bringing something to someone's attention, like how would I want to be approached? And so some of that is, I want to be able to share with a friend, I am concerned about some of the things that I'm seeing, and I just want you to know that I'm here for you. Or if there's anything that I can do to help your situation or what's going on, or really just checking in and having that visibility, like, hey, how are things going with so and so? Is there anything going on that you want to share with me? Or again, if you notice something, just leaving space for that and not doing it in a way like, I can't believe the way that he treated you, or I can't believe this happened, but more so, I'm kind of noticing some things and I'm worried and I care a lot about you. And I want to make sure you know that no matter what, I'm here for you. So it really is in that judgment-free space where people will feel like they aren't being judged or shamed for allowing these behaviors or some of the other things that we sometimes say with our victims. It's really putting that onus back on the perpetrator and just offering to be that source of support. We also know that it can take a person an average of 7 times to leave a relationship that is violent. And so we should not expect for someone to experience violence on a Tuesday and leave on a Wednesday. So I think sometimes when we adjust our expectations, it allows us to show up for people in a more authentic way, because we're not putting pressure on them. Like, hey, I saw this. Why aren't you packing up your stuff? But just, hey, I noticed this and I'm here. And is there something I can do to help you be safe?
So I'm going to definitely, I wrote that down. It's not violence on a Tuesday, leave on a Wednesday. It
Yeah.
takes time in order for that person to leave. And I've also done some learning, some research, and correct me if I'm wrong. When a person is deciding to leave, that is the most violent time where we can have death or injuries. Can you expound on that, please?
Yes, and you're exactly right. When someone is making the determination to leave, they are concerned that all the threats and all of the things that have kept them engaged in the situation will come true. We also have to consider that if a person fears that the individual is going to leave and report them to the police, or there may be consequences, what do they have to lose at that point? And so they may make rash decisions, impulsive decisions to silence the victim. And so a lot of our victims, not only are they brainwashed, manipulated, beat down, and trying to make these decisions with brains that feel foggy and fuzzy because they're being told so many different things that aren't true, they also recognize that it is a threat to them and maybe their family if they make good on some of those consequences that the person threatened to them in the first place. So it can be a really delicate dance for someone to make the decision on when they're going to leave and how are they going to be able to remain out of that household.
Now, you talked about also like children are sometimes a factor as to
Mhm.
why individuals might decide to stay. Is children observing, relationships that have intimate partner violence, is that problematic for them?
Absolutely. Not only can they be witnesses to such violence, but sometimes children will try to intervene to stop someone from hurting their mom or their dad, and they can become secondary victims, both from a physical perspective, but certainly emotional. And mandated reporter laws tell us that if a child is exposed to something that isn't safe, those of us that are in professions that we need to involve child protective services, that may be a situation, if we are made aware of that can further complicate things as well. So it is absolutely a concern for children to be exposed to that level of violence. It can cause a lot of symptomology, and also, them not seeing a healthy relationship demonstrated for them can teach them, maladaptive ways of interacting. And so when they get into the dating scene, when they start their own relationships, how many of these things become habits for them or things that are normalized when they aren't healthy?
And to me, it seems like then it's another cycle, right?
Right.
Like you watch the abuse of others. So then you internalize and either become abusers or accept abuse from other people. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, and it could be that way. And a lot of individuals, I want to make it clear that it's not a causal effect where if you are a victim, you are going to be an offender or you're going to continue to be victimized. But we know the propensity is increased. So for us to be able to say there is a higher likelihood that those things will be experienced. And so we want to get interventions and help and assistance to break that cycle so you can be in healthy relationships and make healthy choices without having that cycle follow you. But it is certainly something that we see time and time again when those interventions don't happen.
So when we also have the intimate partner violence, I mean, recently we read the news about, a child, I believe 12, and their family was killed in the Kansas City area. Do you know the statistics of homicides that involved intimate partner violence?
So one of the difficulty of this is that because intimate partner violence has to be reported or come to someone's attention, I'm not sure that we really have accurate statistics on that. I would say that a significant percentage of homicides do include intimate partner violence because there's domestic violence situations that escalate to those lethal levels. But as we see in child abuse as well, there's such a wide range of statistics that we see. But of course, that is the worst case scenario in these intimate partner violence relationships. And they certainly can lead to fatal consequences if there are no interventions that are done to prevent that.
So that's what I want to swift the topic to kind of change it a little bit.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about like the healing portions and the things that you do or it's helping individuals that are processing it. And I believe we have your QR code that we're going to display while you're talking to give the audience out there some information. So can you give us some information of things that you do to assist individuals? And before you speak, for those that aren't familiar, you're just going to take your phone and, do the camera towards that QR code. You're going to get a website, click on it, and that will have Ms. Murdoch's information on there and the services she provides. So go ahead, Rachel. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we want to support someone in the clinical setting, we want to, listen without judgment, validate the experience, and also provide psychoeducation. So we want to provide resources, help develop a safety plan, and help them understand that power and control cycle where we can explain the honeymoon phase and the tension building phase and some of the other things that they've been experiencing. My mantra in my clinical practice is we have to name it if we're going to tame it. So I want to be able to put words to what the experience has looked like to provide that extra validation and being able to recognize that these can have serious and lasting effects on everyone involved. And if they are considering leaving, like we talked about, knowing that that is a dangerous time for victims because abusers may escalate that violence in an attempt to regain control. So developing the safety plan, involving trusted friends and family, and also accessing local domestic violence organizations for support and resources. So I think the main consideration really is that non-judgmental stance, so they don't shut down or feel like they can't share what they're experiencing.
And so you talked about a safety plan. Can you tell us what are some examples of safety plans that you've developed with individuals that are making that hard choice to leave?
Yes. So it's going to be really getting down to the nitty gritty of what we need to do to keep you safe while you remain in the household and then also once you leave. And so maybe that is starting to do some financial planning. Is there a way to start tucking money away or saving money or having access to funds where we know that there's not going to be financial cutting off or something like that? Is it packing a bag and hiding that somewhere in the house where if you need to leave in a hurry, you have access to that without having to think about it? Is it alerting a friend or a family member to see if you have someone that you could stay with or that you could share what's going on in confidence? So it really is just going to be thinking through those logistics. And as I mentioned earlier, maybe it's pets. Like, what are you going to do with your pets if you do decide to leave? Is there a way to make a plan for the pets prior to, and for example, like maybe that's the day you get them set up for a groom or a overnight stay somewhere, and then you're able to make those changes. So it's really going to be, how can we keep you safe if an exit plan is what you want, but also what you can do at home, and what resources you have available to you. Because again, I always just want to share resources with people, and the timing that people choose to utilize those, of course, is up to them, but you just never know when you share that information when it might be the time that they need to hear it most.
So what type of resources have you provided for individual in your area? And I'll talk about some of the ones that I have in our area. Can you give us
Sure.
some examples?
Yes. So I started my clinical work down in Springfield, Missouri. And so one of my go-to agencies down there is called the Victim Center. And so it's an organization that connects individuals that are experiencing all kinds of victimization. But now being in the Kansas City metropolitan area, some of the organizations for both domestic violence and also human trafficking. And I know that's not what we're here to talk about today, but there really are a lot of overlaps in what we see in intimate partner violence victims and what we may also see in trafficking victims. But a couple of those organizations are going to be like Rose Brooks Center, and they provide emergency shelter, housing assistance, counseling, legal advocacy. There's also Hope House, Synergy, and New House KC. That's not an exhaustive list, but those are some of the more common ones that have come across my caseload and been able to provide assistance to different individuals who are victimized in that way.
And so here in Lawrence, we have the Willow Domestic Violence Center. We have Ballard. The MOXA also kind of works with individuals in this area. And you have a strong relationship with those individuals and making sure that they have resources for individuals that you meet with. Is that correct?
Yes, yes. And, just making sure that if they run into a roadblock or a place is full or not accepting new clients, that we start networking and, helping facilitate those conversations as well as we can. We don't want someone to finally be ready to leave a dangerous situation and feel like they're stuck. And so to be able to know that there are lots of resources in the Kansas City metropolitan area, and we might have to get creative and get outside of town a little bit, but there's going to be something there that has an opening and a space that we can use for these individuals.
So besides survivors, do you do counseling services for children?
Yes, we do.
Okay, and what does those look like? What type of services? What can you give us some information on that?
Sure. So counseling with children does look a bit different than it will with adults, because children don't necessarily want to come in and just talk for, 50 minutes or so. So a lot of our interventions with kids are going to include things that they like anyway, like play or art or games. I have a great game that I like to use with a lot of my clients called Stop, Relax, and Think. And it's a game for working on impulsivity and patience and talking through different scenarios that they may find themselves in and healthy ways to respond to those things. So a lot of our stuff with kids is going to be trauma processing, but also skills-based things so they can learn healthy ways of dealing with symptoms and how does your body show anger and what can you do to stop it from becoming the volcano that erupts. And so it's really getting down to their level and facilitating things that we know that they enjoy anyway and changing those into therapeutic exercises.
Have you ever provided counseling for maybe perpetrators? Have you done that?
I don't, because my practice does focus so heavily on victims and survivors of victimization. I feel like it would be a conflict, and I don't really have specific training in working with perpetrators. And I feel like that could be a disservice to that population as well. So we try to keep those separated with our site, but there are definitely offices that is their focal point, and when we know there's need there as well.
Thank you. Well, what are also resources that us in the community can provide to make sure to like different agencies, to maybe your practice or just different things to making sure that these resources are available so that person, when they need it, they don't feel trapped? What can we do as a community to support?
Sure. So if you have relationships with hospitals, doctors' offices, other, front-facing businesses, and you have a service that you can provide that will help provide that support, even people dropping off flyers at my office is a way that I help, advertise their services and also have those available if there is something that arises. So I would say just being familiar with what is available in your area. I always encourage people to make a phone call themselves and start asking questions so they can learn that process. So when their friend approaches them and says, hey, here's the situation, maybe you've already navigated the process. So if you have a loved one that you are concerned about, maybe you call a couple of the resources and find out if there's a waiting list, find out if there is something that is available to them to help remove a barrier. So just being actively involved and helping provide that access is super important. And if you are someone who provides these services, partnering with your local clinicians and local physicians can be very critical. A lot of referrals that I get are due to word of mouth and relationships and networking. So that does happen often in our field. So definitely working on those relationships is critical.
Yeah, I'd like to put your QR code up there, just another time for individuals to kind of look at that. Recently, I kind of did a campaign where I was collecting, these are hygiene for bags, a little exit plans, safe aid plans. So they have socks and, tampons and pads and things that you need. I also did a mail package type of hygiene kit, because like you said, females and males can be victims of this type of relationship. And that is something that I'm going to be donating to Willard and to also Ballard. So I encourage everyone else, think about giving your time, your money, your resources to make sure that if a person is in this situation, that they have resources to make a different choice.
Right.
Rachel,
I remember I was collecting little hotel samples of shampoo, conditioner when I was on the road. That's another easy way to
provide
resources, and it wouldn't cost you a thing.
Right. So these little things, these are, yes, they're little bags, and just giving people dignity, when they leave, to have something that they know that they can have.
Yes, absolutely.
Rachel, I'd like to just take a moment of silence just for those who have lost their lives to intimate partner violence, those who are in the healing process, and also those who may be struggling at this time. Rachel, thank you so much for our conversations. You're going to have the last word. Tell us something before we leave, something that you want us impactful for us to remember as we talk about, we kind of open the door to this taboo subject. We looked inside and we talked about intimate partners violence. Please give us the last word of what we should be thinking about.
Yes. So again, thank you so much for the opportunity. I think when we start talking about these things and normalizing that this is something that people experience, and while we hate that for individuals, the more that we talk about it and give power to resources and getting help, the lower that the stigma gets. And so this is perfect timing because May is tomorrow and it's Mental Health Awareness Month. And so it's perfect for us to really start considering stopping judgment for people that are experiencing hard times, mental health symptoms, violence, and helping provide support is critical. And just, again, connecting with resources. If there's additional questions that you have, you're welcome to reach out both to Tonda and to me. There's no silly question. And that's how we get knowledge and can empower ourselves with accurate information.
Thank you so much again. And this has been Tonda Hill with Eagles View. I hope you have a great rest of your time. Try to stay safe. And remember, like and share this video. Look at it a couple times and show it to someone that might need the help. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.